What's good, friends list, episode 94 of the Pass Gamecast coming at you. Hideo Kojima has been one of the most prolific and iconic designers within the gaming industry for decades, ranging from his legendary Metal Gear Solid franchise to, most recently, 2019's Death Stranding. Not only has he been tied to some of gaming's greatest franchises, he's also been intrinsically connected to the PlayStation brand. But that could possibly change to a different console line soon: Xbox. So, this week, we examined the rumors of Microsoft attempting to reach a publishing deal with Kojima Productions for their next game, and just what this could mean for the Green Team. How could this affect both the presence of Xbox within Japan and its relationship with Japanese developers? Could we potentially see a reimagining of the cancelled Silent Hill reboot through a deal with Konami? And just what the hell could this game even look like? Plus, Epic Games seems to be losing quite a bit of money from the Epic Games Store. BioShock 4 may be going open world, and much, much more. Coming up on the newest jam-packed episode of the Pass Gamecast.
Now the fun begins.
Budget.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, the whole rigmarole I tell you every damn week. Just do it. Because then you don't got to hear me say it all the time. I'm just busting. But we would really appreciate if you check us out on all those platforms, like, rate, review, all that shit, wherever you get a podcast. And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games alike, and our dope giveaways. I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Travless, on most internet platforms. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Mike P-Pack. Mike, what's good? What's going on? And what in the world of video games has been going on with Mike P-Pack? What have you been playing? What have you been diving into recently when we're talking about all the nerdy shit we love to talk about?
Yeah, for me, I have been playing a little bit of StarCraft 1, the first StarCraft.
Ooh.
Just mixing it in there a little bit, playing it here and there. But outside of that, I've just been playing a little teeny tiny bit, and I really do mean teeny tiny bit, of Valorant. But mostly I've just been still playing. I've still been playing The Hunt, though, mostly.
So nothing too out of the ordinary, I guess.
No. Our listeners by now know that I'm a creature of habit, so I don't really mix it up too much, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, that's great. StarCraft's one of those games that, like, I have such a, like, loving history of whenever I was younger, but, like, even with StarCraft 2, like, never really, like, hopped on. I bought it at launch, like, pretty much all Blizzard games, even to this day. But I remember buying it at launch and, like, just not connecting with it the way that I thought I would. Like, still loving StarCraft, still loving everything that's done for the RTS genre and really bringing it into such a mainstream, zeitgeist, I guess you want to say. But it's a game that, like, I always think about, like, I just, like, I guess me in general, like, I want to get more attachment or reattachment, I guess, to RTSs in general. Like, I remember when I was younger playing a ton of Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3, OG StarCraft, especially, like, the freeware version, whenever I was, like, a real young kid being like, oh, you can only have one map, but fuck it, I'll just play the shit out of this map. Games like that, like, I remember playing such a shit ton of, and especially, like, custom game maps and stuff like that, and, like, Warcraft 2 and 3 specifically. So as I get older, I want to kind of get back into RTSs, but like everything, there's only so much time to go around. And
and RTSs are a type of game that, unfortunately, it does take it takes a lot of time to get good at it, basically. So It's something that I really do like to do. I really do love FPSs or RTSs, excuse me. But it's a time sink if you want to get good at it. So that's probably the only downfall I have with RTSs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's basically like, but especially RTSs, I should preface that by saying, because that is such a, how do I want to say it? It's so, RTSs are so singularly like themselves comparative to any other style of game, realistically. Like, there's so many subgenres of first-person shooters that, there's the hero shooter now, the battle royale, the tactical first-person shooter, the Twitch shooter. Like, there's so many different sects of that, where if you look at RTSs, I mean, there are, but they don't stray as much as we've seen shooters kind of evolve. And granted, the space, I don't think is as cutthroat and competitive as it once was, when talking about RTSs right now, at least at a mainstream level, where we see the first-person shooter for the past 10 plus years now become everybody and their brother wants a first-person shooter multiplayer that, really got kicked off by Halo back in the day, that people have just been trying to, in terms of console, I mean, and then obviously with Counter-Strike really doing that with, and Quake and Doom, like doing that with, PC first-person shooters, but really becoming this like, centerpiece. But we just haven't seen that with RTSs. But in general, like, RTSs are so singularly its own thing where it just takes such a full breed of time commitment that is just ridiculous. I mean, it's crazy. Even first-person shooters, to a degree, especially people who are, we saw it a lot of that learning curve that came with a lot of people whenever Valorant blew up right away. And you mentioning that, earlier, when that new game always pops off, people always want to jump in and be at the ground floor to, get in, be the first to, stream it heavily or play it heavily or get this rank or something like that. But, we saw a lot of people come from Overwatch, from Fortnite, and go into playing this, and the Counter-Strike pros have such a heavy-handed, jump on all of them, just from shooting mechanics alone that carry you. And granted, there's, I'm sure people coming in with Overwatch playing that game had more, alt utilization skills over, maybe shooting mechanics and stuff like that, and they were maybe used to managing those well, but at the same time, Counter-Strike uses resources and things like that in a first-person shooter that is kind of economy-based, and like, but point being that you saw that jump ahead of people, but in RTSs, it's just like, it's just a ridiculously singular beast that I can't think of, but on my end, it's kind of been mostly the same. Still grinding a lot of Overwatch right now. That just seems to be my bread and butter. But there's a couple of games that like I do want to kind of go back to. I'm getting the itch to like get back into Metal Gear. I've been wanting to, I think, especially since the whole, and I know this is an Xbox show, but bear with me for a second, just because it's on everything. But the one singular game that isn't is the original Metal Gear Solid, and I bought the PS1 Classic version of that a long time ago, but now with the PS3 store shutting down, that's the one like PS1 game that never made the jump to PS4 or modern consoles. You can play it on PC, but you can only play it through GOG. Like, it's not available on Steam. It's, it's just very niche to get a hold of, and I'd like to play that with my fiance, because I think that she would like, we'll watch like Donkey videos and stuff like that, and they always will like, he'll always like reference like Psycho Mantis, like, and she never, like, I always laugh at that stuff, but she doesn't get that. So like, I think I'd like to have her up to speed on those jokes and stuff. Plus, it's a great game. But it's only available on PS3, so digging that out and reinstalling it and all that shit. But
you know why?
Why?
Because PS3 make the best games.
PS3 the Wii shit. The original, that is Chad Warren, aka the original internet troll. I mean, really, that man revolutionized internet trolling the way we see it. But yeah, nothing out of the ordinary with me for the most part with my gaming. We're inching closer to that first real big game in my eyes that I'm super excited about for the year, being obviously Resident Evil 8. We are now less than a month away for playing that. Actually, 3 weeks away, pretty much. Just under 3 weeks away from this game. So I am ridiculously excited about that and wanting to jump into that. But I digress. Mike, let's head into Button Mash before we kick off the big topics and news for this week. And if you're new to the show, Button Mash, it's where we run through our quick hit stuff, our quick hit news stories to get you caught up and round up the week before we head into our bigger topics. So let's kick it off in Button Mash, starting with BioShock, one of the franchises that's near and dear to my heart. The fourth one coming soon by developer Cloud Gaming. And guess what? Or Cloud Chamber, I'm sorry. And guess what? They're hiring, which is good news to hear about. And a new job description for a senior writer may give us some hints as to what's in store for the franchise. The new job listing, first reported by PC Games N, is specifically targeted at applicants, quote, who can weave impactful, character-driven stories into an open world setting. The senior writer will also assist in crafting, quote, primary and secondary mission content, suggesting the new BioShock will allow players to veer off the main path throughout the game. The role will be charged with assisting in the, quote, creation and execution of the core story, including the writing of dialogue and other narrative elements as directed, end quote, which is really interesting. BioShock 4 may be going open world. I mean, they've always been kind of expansive levels, but have stayed relatively linear for the most part. They haven't really, diverted away from that.
It's definitely an interesting thing to kind of stumble upon. One day you're just kind of looking at developer job listings and you see that. It's like, holy shit.
The internet stays undefeated with that. Some of the best detectives out there work in these cases that probably should be helping out, with like murder cases and shit like that. Whenever they find these like random gems in there, they can find all this shit, but who knows? Anyways, next up, just 2 weeks after its enormous 1.2 patch, Cyberpunk 2077, still getting worked on, has received a 1.21 hotfix designed to improve game stability and fixes any issues that could block game progression, which was a big issue with a lot of people that forced them off when the game first came out. Announced and detailed on the Cyberpunk 2077 website. You can read all the full patch notes over there and whatnot, even too in the game wherever you bought it. It's all available. The hotfix is out now for PC consoles and Stadia. At least some of these fixes target problems that appeared after the 1.2 patch, including fixing the bizarre issue that caused the entire world to be covered in a sandstorm weather effect. CD Projekt Red has described the 1.2 patch as a, quote, step towards bringing the game back to the PlayStation Store, where it has been missing for well over 100 days, which is crazy to think about. I haven't necessarily stayed on top of that on the PlayStation end just because I play the game on PC personally, but it's still crazy that is not on the PSN, which is nuts. The 1.2 hotfix will presumably be another step on the journey. A new post on the Call of Duty Twitter feed has announced a time and date for what it describes as, quote, the end, seemingly suggesting that the much-rumored Warzone map nuking event is imminent. The short video clip, which displays the screen of a Cold War-era computer, displays a glitching image of a skull that quickly replaced with 4:21:12 p.m. Pacific time. This clip is accompanied by the text, quote, the end is near, ... For quite some time now, rumors and leaks have pointed to Call of Duty Warzone's Verdansk map being, quote, blown up by a nuclear bombardment, allowing it to be replaced with a Cold War-era version of the landscape to better currently tie into Black Ops Cold War storyline. It appears such rumors were correct and that the nuclear event is now set to happen at 12 p.m. Pacific time on April 21st. Speaking of Call of Duty and Warzone and all of that, cheating has been a huge issue in both of those games, shocker, and the teams behind the games have been given an update on how they plan to continue to combat them with such actions as large ban waves. The Call of Duty staff shared the update in a blog confirming that their security and enforcement team has issued more than 475,000 permabans, not just, slap on the wrist, here you got to sit out for 7 days or whatever. No, permabans, get the fuck out of here, in Call of Duty Warzone. And that April 11th ban wave is the 7th highest volume set of bans since February. Outriders has confirmed that crossplay between PlayStation, Xbox, and PC is once again fully functional, and it has also confirmed that it is hard at work on resolving the inventory wiping bug that is plaguing many players, and that a restoration event in the near future is set to bring back what was lost. Crossplay was turned off during the Outriders rocky launch, but the latest patch has now been deployed to all platforms, will now allow friends to play together no matter where they choose to play. And then finally, during WrestleMania 37, WWE 2K22 was revealed, which they took a year off last year, was revealed alongside a first look at gameplay featuring Rey Mysterio, who shockingly is still wrestling. That's kind of wild. He's like 60, and Cesaro. The short clip, which you could see over on YouTube.com. I don't know why I said .com. That was really weird. YouTube. I don't think I've ever said YouTube.com before. That's weird. The short clip, which you can see over on WWE's YouTube page, features gameplay captured from an in-work in progress build, but showcases the new character models and actions fans can expect when the game arrives later this year. So, Mike, that about does it for Button Mash. Anything you want to run back before we head into our big topics and get talking on the latest and greatest news? Anything in Button Mash you want to recover?
I did already touch on BioShock briefly. So I will say that Cyberpunk continuing to get worked on is a little bit of like a face-saving maneuver, and I am appreciative of the hard work of the devs there, because it would have been easy for them to just throw in the towel and say, you know what, it is what it is. This is what we got. We dropped the ball there.
Do you ever feel, and let me just ask you this, I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you ever feel like you're going to see that game in a state where, like, you as somebody who has, shown interest in the game a little bit in the past, but stayed away because of all the bugs and things like that, do you ever feel like you're going to be confident enough to buy this game where it gets to a state where you don't have to worry about that, or that the price justifies it even?
That's a hard one to answer, because
I know it's kind of pie in the sky, like hypothetical, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I was always really interested in playing it, so I don't see why I wouldn't give it a shot at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's a lot that has to be done for me to be willing to give that game a shot, and it's unfortunate that that's how it is. But I don't necessarily feel inclined to use my money to support a dev studio like that. And I know it's not necessarily the devs' fault who are ultimately going to pay the price for it, but I truly do believe that when it comes down to something or someone, if you don't agree with their message, if you don't agree with what they're doing, to me, the best way to kind of make that apparent is to simply spend your money elsewhere. That's the way I truly believe in the economy and everything, that if you are upset with the way something is, simply don't spend your money there, and the problem will be solved at that point in time. So that's one of the reasons why I'm holding off. Again, like I said, I do feel bad that ultimately the person or the people paying the price are the lowly devs, and it's not necessarily their fault. So I do genuinely feel pretty bad about that. But at the end of the day, it's my money, and I'm going to spend it as I see fit. And right now, that game just isn't one that I see, worth the investment at this point in time.
No, definitely. And as somebody who, bought the game, had it preloaded, pre-release and everything like that, had it ready to go at launch, bought it at launch, because obviously I wanted to make sure we covered it, because it was one of the biggest games to come out last year and of the generation, realistically. I wanted to make sure we were able to talk about it and have a conversation about it and whatnot. But, I've put, and let me pull up my Steam account real quick, because I can't remember the exact amount, but...
I did see you playing it quite a lot when it first came out.
Yeah, let me see. I put 29 hours into Cyberpunk. 29. Yeah. If you would have asked me, hell, I'd say, 2 months before that, a month before that I would only put 29 hours into Cyberpunk 2077 with a playthrough, and I'll be quite honest, instantly uninstall it, and not touch it again. Not because it was bad, but of how forgettable the experience was because of all the issues that I ran into. I mean, the story was pretty good, and I put it in our top games of last year on the show for the sole fact of that did help. The writing was still pretty good within it and whatnot, and the acting was great, and the voice work was great, but it just was. If you would have told me I only put 29 hours into it after I put like 100 hours into The Witcher 3, like, it just, to me, that just shocks me. I just never would have thought this game would be in this place, given the pedigree that CD Projekt Red has come into, the goodwill that they've built up with their fan base in terms of how they handle content and whatnot that they put out, and being very much, hey, it's out when it's out, it'll be ready when it's ready. We're not rushing this, yada yada. But like we've talked about, them going public and different things like that, and having investors and whatnot. Yeah, they're starting, for a Polish company, they're starting to become very, very, very Americanized whenever you look at how they handle it from a, bending to the wheel of capitalism and money and whatnot. You get what I'm saying? Like that just, their mindset clearly hasn't aged well. Like it hasn't stayed true to the form that they started in. They've, changed. So it sucks. Anything else though you want to run through Button Mash before we get to the tooth?
No, that's it. I will say that it is interesting that the WrestleMania game, I think it's a really good idea that they wait a whole year. That's something that I've been begging a lot of dev studios that do sports games to do.
Yeah, take a year off.
Yeah, it's so much better for you to just take a year off than it is for you to just like put out slop every year.
I mean, it was because they didn't do 21. They did WWE 2K20 last, if I remember correctly, and it's like panned as one of the worst games of all time, just because of how bad it was. Like it was. They're putting out, we're talking a game that is developed in the later stages of hardware's life cycle, is usually whenever you're seeing the best work from devs, because they've been so used to this hardware that they've been making games on. They know ins and outs of things, of how to specifically develop around hardware limitations and things like that to get the most out of these products that they're putting out there. And granted, it's a third party product that is going on tons of different platforms and whatnot, especially it coming to the Switch as well. I believe it went to the Switch. I know they were making them for the Switch, but I think this one did. So developing that stuff to be scalable to a degree, it's hard, but a lot of choices. I remember seeing so many just buggy issues with this game that it would just become unplayable for a lot of people, and that it was just trash. Like, and not to, I'm not trying to punch down by any means by, on the devs who make these games and whatnot, because as we've seen a lot with yearly sports games and whatnot, while they have multiple, teams working on these at one time, in a cycle of some sorts, it's still, you gotta still think, time is of the essence with a lot of these yearly, annualized sports games. So, it was the right thing to say, no, let's peel it back. Let's find a new development team to work with, because I knew they dropped the one after that. I remember hearing that on a podcast, a gaming podcast I listened to, that was news that they dropped them and they were looking to go with somebody else. But I remember, I haven't played a wrestling game in so long. But I remember all of my favorite wrestling games were ones that were more, not arcadey, like not, I don't want to say simulation or anything like that, but they were the ones that melded the arcade and simulation together. They didn't take either one too serious. It wasn't too over the top arcadey, cartoony, but it wasn't completely, when we're talking about NBA 2K or something like that, or even if you want to take an analog of like a Forza Motorsport, where it's super, super simulation style realistic, like that doesn't always work too. That gets kind of convoluted at times for people. So
definitely,
I do agree though. It was good to take a year off. I mean, some of my favorite franchises now out there, one specifically, one of my favorite third party franchises, Assassin's Creed, took a year off, and did again recently. Took a year off in between a couple of their games, and it's paid off in droves. So, Mike, let's into our big topics news for this week. And this one kind of broke really late last week, and we probably could have fit it onto the show, but I didn't want to kind of jam pack our show because I feel like this one deserved its time to breathe as somebody who is a fan of this person and this development team. So it kind of broke a little late that I wanted to give it its time to breathe. But there are rumors that Xbox and Microsoft, obviously, are looking to be in talks, or reportedly talking, to publish Hideo Kojima, the mastermind behind Metal Gear Solid, Death Stranding, the failed, or I don't want to say failed, but the canceled PT Silent Hills project, one of the most famous game designers and developers in gaming history and prolific. Kojima Productions' next game. And it's, some people are now saying, well, no, I could see it, this and that. Like, it's not seeming as crazy as some people would think it would be, for a lot of different reasons. So I kind of want to break into this. And granted, before we kind of go into everything, it's important to note that this is only rumor. This is a rumor mill topic. This is nothing set in stone. This is all, this person is saying this person is reporting this. Nothing has been officially confirmed or anything like that. It's all off of word of mouth type of stuff right now. But there's been some, where there's smoke, there might be fire. And I'm a big believer of that. So Nicholas Downey over at Windows Central has a good write-up on everything that kind of shapes this sect of Jeff Grubb's original article over on GamesBeat, that he kind of touched on a couple different topics, but this was one of the big chunks to pull out of it that I think Nick did a really good job kind of breaking it down specifically. So let's jump into it. As always, link in the description. The rumor mill is always turning, with talk of a new Hideo Kojima project now circulating and involvement from Microsoft. Following up the 2019 release of PlayStation launch exclusive Death Stranding, speculation on Kojima Productions' new project has ignited, from helming a Silent Hill reimagining to a full Metal Gear Solid remake. But with a new report, it appears that things could possibly get crazier. According to a new report from VentureBeat via GamesBeat editor Jeff Grubb, Kojima is currently in talks with Microsoft and its Xbox Game Studio publishing arm for its next game. The report states that this deal has not yet been closed, but rather an ongoing conversation between the two firms. This reportedly supplements Microsoft's initiative to leverage more Japanese developer talent across the Xbox ecosystem. This comes as Microsoft continues to expand its overseas presence, including Japanese content on Xbox systems and Xbox Game Pass. Kojima's long-standing relationship with Sony comes from his beginnings at Konami, including its biggest deal to date with PlayStation for Death Stranding. That led to PlayStation's first-party studio Guerrilla Games providing not only essential development help on the project, but also granted Kojima access to the studio's in-house Decima game engine. But at the same time, this comes Hideo Kojima now heading an independent studio with an established reputation in going against expectations. Who knows? Maybe those cryptic shelves behind Xbox head Phil Spencer weren't for nothing, which is a reference to a recent video that had Phil Spencer on it. And since really the announcement of the Xbox Series X, for the most part, anytime there's been, and especially too with the pandemic and everything like that, every time that Phil Spencer's been on camera in some kind of formal setting, or doing an interview or something like that, people have been pointing out things that have been in the background of on his shelf and whatnot. One being, I believe, a Series X at one point. For sure, there was an Xbox Series S before that was announced, and that was on his shelf that people, found later on. And there's been a couple different instances, but most recently, there's been the Ludens figure, the mascot of Kojima's Productions, was on his shelf, which, a lot of people are like, oh, that normally is associated with the PlayStation brand and whatnot. Wow, that's interesting. And him saying, even at one point, I think saying like he's just a big fan, but now it may seem like there's a little more to this. So, I know this feels like it's like once a week we end up, talking about this stuff, but it seems like once again, Microsoft will not slow down in regards to flexing its financial muscles in terms of, just creating new partnerships. So, but let's be clear though. To me, and I think this is very safe to say, though, in no way is this talk of an acquisition between the two of Microsoft purchasing Kojima Productions. For those who aren't really familiar with the whole situation, the whole reason Kojima and Konami, who he had made, obviously several projects under some of his best work with the Metal Gear series up until Metal Gear 5, obviously was going to work on the Silent Hills and Silent Hill reboot, Silent Hills, or whatever you want to call it, had a falling out, for specifically creative differences. It wasn't amicable from what a lot of people say. There were a lot of creative differences, I'm sure financial differences and whatnot between the two. So I really don't see Kojima Productions wanting to become an owned entity again in the near future for that. So keep this in mind. We're talking a partnership, a publishing deal, something like that where, Xbox, similar to how Death Stranding was a PlayStation console exclusive, where Sony funded the project saying, hey, here's a blank check. We'll publish your next game for you. We'll fund your next game, the production of that. We'll back it up with marketing, yada, yada. As long as it's a console launch exclusive on our platform, or console exclusive still to this day. But you get what I mean. It came to PC too. But so envision it with that. But from what we've seen with their past projects, he's not afraid to take a nice big check to do that partner publishing, to fund these unique games with them. So my question isn't necessarily, whether or not this is true, because like I said, I personally believe that there must be some talks between the two happening. One, obviously, Jeff Grubb is somebody who is very, very, very well respected right now in the modern, echo chamber, whatever you want to call it, of gaming, the zeitgeist of games media right now, who is very reputable, somebody who is very, very, respected with a lot of his reporting that he's done within the rumor mill to kind of, distinguish between, hey, this is, falsehood, there's nothing to hear with this, but hey, this is what I've been hearing, but has also knows when to, very much like Jason Schreier, who has been very good at, hey, I'm not going to talk until I know something is pretty much right, or I'm not going to disclose things that are just to start something. It's stuff that's backed up. So just keep in mind with that. But so I personally believe there's talks between the two, not just for that, but when there's so much smoke, there has to be some kind of fire. But, what kind of experience does Xbox want from Kojima? To me, it feels like they just want the name attachment, really, not only to say that, hey, we have the next Kojima Productions game as a console exclusive, but also to really bolster that, not only their footprint within the Japanese gaming market, but also to bring Japanese game development talent to their platforms over here as well, to have success both over there, because we've known for years how long they've struggled within the Japanese gaming market. I mean, Xbox have been, if you look, there's probably more people with, who are buying on a daily basis over there a Wii that has been discontinued for how long than an Xbox One, and how potentially even Xbox Series systems now. Who knows? But you get my point. It's very, 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 very bleak over there in previous console generations with Xbox. But, not only bringing the, talent from there, or not only getting their systems and their content over there and, resonating with that audience, but also, being able to bring that talent that's over there into and introduce them to the Xbox ecosystem within the US and North American market and all over the world too. So what do you think could be Kojima's next game? Obviously they've talked about, we've heard rumors of, hey, they worked something out with Konami. They were able to license out the Metal Gear, IP, and they're going to remake Metal Gear Solid, which I would totally be fucking down with. That'd be sick. But that's very, I think, hyperbolic to a degree, because there would be a lot that has to go on with that to make that happen. We've heard so many different things about what it could be. Doing the same thing with Silent Hill to make Silent Hills happen again. There's a lot with it, and like I said, probably not those things with licenses and whatnot, but who the hell knows? We could see him. He said he wants to try horror again. He wants to give that another shot under his own, under his own namesake, under Kojima Productions. So, could we somewhat see a spiritual successor to PT out of this? There's a lot to hypothesize about this, Mike. I want to kind of get your opinion on it. I've been talking a lot.
No worries. I definitely see a situation that's very, maybe not necessarily something that's super I wouldn't say it's anything that's going to be necessarily groundbreaking as far as I'm sure that whatever game that is developed is going to be a stellar game.
Hmm.
And that's not necessarily what I mean. I mean solely for the fact that getting a huge potential game like this with Kojima, this is something that we were talking about whenever, the console was first coming out. What can Microsoft really do? And this is one of the things we said, you really need to get better first party experiences if you really want to make a splash.
Hmm.
And here we are, we see that starting to happen, which is a big deal to me. I think that it shows that Microsoft we always knew that they were serious, right? Like we knew that they were going to take it serious, but I wasn't expecting a move of this magnitude. This is actually a lot bigger than people might lead on. I understand that it is solely for a game and they're not going to own the studio or anything, but that's completely fine. You're going to get to see, one of the things that Sony was, so praisily respected for was their first party exclusives. And that was a big part of that was Kojima Productions. And now he's going to, give Microsoft a little taste of that. And to me, that's a huge deal because that's the experience that I think we all can agree has really been lacking as far as Microsoft's games. A great first person, like a great story driven game has been what has been lacking, and getting a chance to see that, getting a chance to play that is going to be huge. Again, without them actually taking or owning the studio, if you will, I totally understand why Kojima would want to hold, their rights, and they wouldn't necessarily want to be purchased. There's no need for them or reason for them to really go through that, to be honest. But, I see this as a chance for gamers to get exposed to a game that they should have been exposed to, or a type of game that they should have been exposed to a long time ago. And again, like you said, this gives them the opportunity to kind of break into the Japanese market, which is something that they have struggled to do for a very long time. So none of that can be understated. All of that is so monumentally important that, there's nothing but excitement from me as far as, what I'm expecting going forward here.
No, and that's my thing. The Kojima is such a, how do I want to say this? He's one of the most unique creative minds in gaming, period, ever. He's somebody that, I kind of admired from afar in terms of his games that he put out. Even like growing up, like I had known a Metal Gear. I played a little bit of Metal Gear. I played a little bit of Metal Gear Solid, 4 when it came out. But I kind of missed them on the PS2. For some reason, I just never really played them. But when I got PS3, I kind of dabbled in a little bit. But it always seemed like it was such a big jump because there's so much back history to Metal Gear and everything like that. But as I get older, it's a franchise I'm starting to love more and more and more and more, especially kind of like almost Adam was with, with the same game. But like Metal Gear Solid 5 was really my like really true jumping in point where I like learned to love this series and be like, whoa, okay, I'm in, which has me, going back and playing all the older games. So, I have the HD collections and everything like that. Even on looking on my desk, I have a Solid Snake statue on my desk. Like, I really love the character, the world, everything like that. He is by far one of the most unique minds in here. And to say that means that both a good, and to a lot of people, that's, a great thing there. But I understand that his games aren't for everyone. I think a move like that speaks more to show that, like, if Microsoft was to say, hey, we've reached a deal with Kojima Productions. And just to put in perspective, and to add to this too, I'm somebody who has talked about it on the show too. Now, especially when it came to PC, and was able to actually use that in conversations around the content of our show because it was a PlayStation game, but now a PC game that I really, really enjoyed. Death Stranding. It's an interesting game. It's, like I said, it is wholly unique. It is one of the most unique experiences you could play in gaming today, and you're either going to love it or it's not going to be for you. I loved it. It's one of the most well acted games too. Hands down. I mean, my God, look at the cast that's in that game, in their likenesses and what they were able to portray with the technology that we have now alone, with their acting is unbelievable. But on top of that, though, when you have to look at, if Microsoft does say, hey, we reached an agreement, we're going to do that at E3, they talk about this or something like that, now that we know E3 is coming back in a digital manner and Xbox is going to be there, or at least partnered with them to do a digital showcase, say for some reason that this gets signed and that's where they announce it and this and that. And I wouldn't be shocked also too, if this does come to fruition, I would not be shocked if we see what this game is like when it's announced, and if we see that announced within the next 6 months, I would not be shocked, because if you look at Death Stranding, whenever it was announced, that was really leading up to the partnership with that was before they received the support of Guerrilla Games over in Germany, the crew behind, or the development team behind Horizon Zero Dawn, Killzone, all that. But before they got, that was before Kojima even had his hands on their engine, the Decima engine. So we saw a proof of concept. We saw this. That was where they revealed that Norman Reedus was playing in this game. He was the main character in this game. And, we saw a cinematic for that. That it's shocking how quick that game turned around and how fast it got out and how fucking polished that game is. It's ridiculous. But point being, we may see that. But I want people to keep in mind too that Death Stranding, at least on console, and we're talking about the console that is one of the highest selling consoles, home video game consoles ever in the PlayStation 4, only sold 4 million copies. Now, 4 million copies, still a lot of fucking copies sold for a game that is kind of wonky and out there a little bit. But a deal like this, and what I kind of want to round this back to, this is a deal that is definitely for, to me, the enthusiast. This is for somebody who isn't necessarily the casual gamer. This isn't a deal that is the person who buys Madden and Call of Duty every year that we talk about, who is fucking hugely important to Microsoft because they're one of the people that they know they can easily bring into the Game Pass ecosystem and things like that, but are their bread and butter for the most part. It's not necessarily talking to them. A deal like Bethesda, yeah, maybe that does start to talk to them a little bit more because of how much is in there, and that's an acquisition. And when we're talking about, franchises like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, those kind of, and Doom as well, like those branch out a little bit more than some of the other, something like necessarily a Death Stranding would, that is really out there and stuff like that. That branches out a little bit more, but something like this is much more, really, it's a high-end, it would be a high-end indie game for the most part, because technically Kojima Productions is an independent game studio. They're not owned by anyone. They're solely financed, everything like that. Like, they are an indie studio for the most part, a high-end indie studio, and I'm sure some people have an issue with that, where Kojima has kind of, tongue-in-cheek referenced that they did it on their own, this and that, and kind of, people have been like, well, you can't really wear the indie moniker with how some of the things you say and do with, all these big name actors and the budget behind this game and this and that. Like, that's, yeah, you are, but you have a, nice publishing deal from PlayStation. That's a little different. So,
right.
So there's a lot to unbox with what they would want out of this project and what they would want out of this. Obviously, if this happens, we don't know for sure, but if you ask me, it's going to be something solely unique. It's not going to be, I don't see that. I think personally, as somebody who's a fan of Metal Gear, who wants nothing more than Metal Gear Solid Remake to come next in the pipeline, I think we see that from somebody more like a Blue Point Studio under Sony. I think that's more of a Sony thing that we see from. And that's totally fine because that seems more likely to me because of the animosity behind, or that's still, from what it sounds like, Konami and Kojima. Like, a lot of people want that reunion. I do too. And I think that one day will happen. I just still think, 5-6 years later, still a little soon. That's a project between them. We'll see. Because especially Konami now, though, at least it sounds like they're starting to get back into the game development. They took a long time off where they're pretty much post Metal Gear Solid 5. Like, they had Metal Gear Survive, the like shitty survival horror game that was in Metal Gear. It was basically like a zombies mode, but in the Metal Gear 5. I don't even know if it was in the Fox engine. I would imagine because they probably own that. Yeah, so probably was in the Fox engine of that Metal Gear Solid 5 was built in, but got a lot of shitty reviews. But you haven't really seen them do anything with that. They haven't done anything really with a Castlevania. They haven't done anything with what's the other, Silent Hill. Like, they, besides the Dead by Daylight collab, that's about it. They've just kind of stuck to slot machines and stuff like that. Like, but now we're starting to see them, and the rumor is that they're wanting to, and it may have been confirmed now, but the word on the street is they're wanting to work with more third parties, development studios, to partner with them to license out their IP. So yeah, it's possible that could happen with Microsoft. They have the money to make that happen, but then you gotta think, okay, well, who's truly publishing this game, and how is that all working out? If it's just big menage a trois between fucking like Microsoft and Kojima Productions and Konami, like, that's a lot of entities to start working with over one project that probably I don't think would be as profitable as people think in that idea. Where if you do it with Sony, that makes a little more sense, and I think there's a little more to build around from a marketing standpoint and different things like that. But trust me, I'd love to see it either way, wherever they do it at. But to me, this seems like it's Kojima getting to be Kojima. And a lot of people say that's him having full reign creatively of what he wants to do, because that dude just wants to make weird shit. And weird shit's good. Like, that is, Sony, we're finding out this week, really, with the word on them, Sony focusing on only wanting to do really big blockbuster, safe games, conservative bets they want to do. They canceled the pitch of Days Gone 2, which Days Gone sold great with Ben's studio developing it, and Ben pitched it, a sequel to that. They canned it, sold well, but it wasn't critically acclaimed. So it's stuff like that. We're starting to see them. There's talk of potentially there being a Last of Us remake now in development currently. That game only came out 7-8 years ago. Like, it's not that old, and it was remastered at the beginning of last generation. It holds up well. You can play it on your PlayStation 5 right now, fucking gorgeous, in 60 frames per second. So to me, we're not seeing the same PlayStation on that side anymore that we once saw, and that's where I say, like, okay, 4 million copies of Death Stranding, yeah, is a lot for a weird game like that, but that's not a lot in the eyes of PlayStation exclusive that we see over there. So to me, that's more of a Kojima maybe saying, okay, fuck you, I'm gonna go and I want to keep doing my weird shit. That's why I left Konami. That's why we had our breakup. I'd made my own studio, my own production company. I want to go and do this, and I want somebody to pay me, give me a fucking blank check to go and make my game, because it'll sell a lot, and it'll get eyes on your product no matter what. It may not sell, Super Mario Brothers numbers or anything like that, but it's going to sell a lot of numbers within the hardcore gaming community, and it's going to create a lot of buzz. Most importantly, this is a marketing deal more than anything. And we saw that with PlayStation, with Death Stranding. But if Sony doesn't want to take that gamble anymore in that stuff, hey, Microsoft steps in. Well, we got a blank check for you. We'll give you that. Yeah, we always want more. We have the deep pockets. They have fucking much deeper pockets than Sony. So
yeah,
it's really going to be interesting to see kind of where there's so much. We just don't know anything, but there's a ton of smoke. I feel there has to be a fire. I would be shocked if this isn't, Jeff Grubb, hey, I got this info wrong type of thing. Like, I would be shocked that I think this happens. I think Microsoft sees that this might be a once, I don't want to be hyperbolic with this, but it might be a once in a lifetime opportunity to make something, like I said, is more of a marketing move more than anything, that could create a big splash, that could really send a buzz and say, holy shit, Microsoft is really not messing around. I mean, if Bethesda didn't get you, and if all those studio acquisitions didn't get you, here's a publishing deal with somebody who is so intrinsically tied to PlayStation's history, now fucking coming on our side, and his game is only going to be playable in our ecosystem. It will not touch Sony's platform. So come play it here. Like that's huge. That more than anything, like I said, marketing speak, the buzz around that would put around Xbox Game Pass. Who the fuck? I mean, if it's an Xbox Game Studio published title, it'll be on Game Pass day one. That's huge to think about. That a Hideo Kojima game, developed game, from the maker of Metal Gear fucking Solid, from the person who is, people say that PT is the best horror game ever made, and it's fucking 20 minutes. Like, that person, one of the biggest creative minds in this industry, in the history of this industry, his game is going to be free day one on Xbox Game Pass. That's just, it's big. So there's a lot that can go on with this, man. I mean, it's crazy. We are truly, truly, truly living in a fucking, like, incredible timeline right now. Like, this is fucking nuts. We're living in the best one. I mean, yeah, cancer sucks and all that shit sucks, but when we're talking video games, we're living a fucking great timeline. You know, we lucked out with this. And you know what's funny? I was actually talking to, I'll bring this up to Molly every now and then, my fiance. We like, and I'm like you, Mike. Like, I love the outdoors. I love going camping. I love going fishing, hunting. Like, I do like, and I think that's just because we grew up in the Laurel Highlands area. But like, I say this jokingly, but not really at the same time. We fucking lucked out in terms of the time period that we were born in. Like, where, yeah, it would have been dope to live in the like 70s. We would have saw a fucking shit ton of great music, and parties would have been great and everything like that. Like, that's all well and fine, but technology wise right now, like, we started at such a great age, like getting acquainted with technology, that I think we evolved at the perfect time with technology. Like, I know this is super random, but what I was just talking about kind of got me thinking of that, where I like was telling Molly, I'm like, we fucking lucked out. Like, we really did. Like, we lucked out in the perfect time where, like, I can just fucking pull out my phone and be doing 50 billion other things. I have a computer in my pocket. Like, what would I have to do back in the 70s? Fucking go outside and ride my bike? I'll just fucking go and play a simulator on my bike on my fucking $2,000 computer. Like, fuck that. That sounds much more appeasing. No, I'm kidding on that end. But it's just crazy that we live in this. But
yeah, I do think, you know, we were really lucky, and we still are very lucky to kind of get to grow up when we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Is there negatives? I mean, obviously, there's always going to be some bad with the good, but overall, I can say, you know, without a doubt, we're very lucky to kind of live when we live, because basically, you know, we don't really have to worry about all that much, and we so much crazy technology that we get to play with, that we are really lucky.
Yeah, it's just funny to think about. Like, I joke because I love going outside. I love doing things outside. But at the same time too, like, it's just, we really do live in the best, like, where it's like personal computers were like really starting to hit their stride with, like, when we were, you know, we were what, 2 years old or whatever, when Windows 95 came out, where it's like the true version of the modern desktop computer was first starting to come up, where we kind of like just grew and evolved with that as that evolved. Like, it just perfectly, I think, perfect timeline of being able to appreciate and grow with technology as it really ramped up with its growth. It's just crazy to think about, but total tangent. But I just love thinking about that. And whenever we were wrapping up that segment, it kind of hit me. I was like, God, I was just talking about this the other day. Like, we fucking lucked out, because if not, we'd be in like fucking 1776, like fucking churning butter and shit like that for fun. Like, just imagine that. Like, no, I'm gonna, I'm gonna go play like my Xbox. Oh, well, I gotta go fucking churn butter. Like, no, like fuck that. No, I'm good. I'm good. I know Back to the Future for me. I'm fucking perfect.
It's definitely we're very lucky to live when we live. That much is true. Yes.
I just think of like the fucking kid like pushing that like wooden wheel thing with a stick down the road. Like, that's what they had to fucking entertain themselves with. Fuck
Literally.
that. I'm not doing that. I'm so lucky. Fuck that. anyways, like, let's head into our last news article for this week. And this one's kind of a like, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. But I'm curious to get your opinion on it. And it's kind of always a hot button topic, really, in general, whenever we're talking to our PC focused portion of the audience. It's a place that we love. Epic is losing hundreds of millions as it battles to gain market share from Steam. If I could talk. This comes from Adam Bankhurst over on IGN. As always, link in the description. Epic is set to lose at least $330 million in its battle to gain market share from Steam, mainly due to its offering exclusive games and free titles on its Epic Games Store. As reported by PC Gamer, Epic's legal fight with Apple has given us insight into how much Epic is spending to build up the Epic Games Store, including that it committed around $444 million to exclusively deal in 2020 games alone. This money was spent on, quote, minimum guarantees for games that are exclusive to the Epic Games Store for a year. Since these games will not appear on Steam, Epic is offering these guarantees as advances to publishers whether or not their games sell enough to cover it. For example, Epic paid 505 Games, who published Control, $10.45 million for Control's exclusivity back in 2019. In Epic's end-of-year report, Epic confirmed that players spent $700 million on the Epic Game Store in 2020, but these third-party games only accounted for $265 million of that in total. This reveals that Epic has yet to earn back the $444 million in advances that these third-party publishers, and even though some of these deals are surely for games in the future, Apple claims Epic is going to lose, quote, at least $330 million in unrecouped costs from minimum guarantees alone, if 2019's deals are thrown in as well. Apple's projections, which can be seen over on their website, hint that when factoring in exclusives and all other expenses, the Epic Game Store may lose somewhere between $600 million in total by the end of 2021. It also suggests that Epic Game Store will not be profitable until 2027. These estimates from Apple are from its summary of the arguments it plans to bring to court in May of 2021, as it defends itself against Epic's antitrust complaint. Epic has already responded to these findings, and it shared that it expects the Epic Game Store to start earning annual profits in 2023. Furthermore, while Apple claims Epic is, quote, losing money, Epic claims it is investing money, and that it is that this and its 12% revenue share are all part of a plan to take on the behemoth that is Steam. Quote, EGS is not yet profitable as its current scale and stage of development because it has front-loaded its marketing and user acquisition costs to gain market share, reads Epic's filing, citing CEO Tim Sweeney. So, the old saying is you have to spend money to make money, but we've truly never seen it to this degree within gaming because, well, there really truly never has been a platform to rival Steam within its 15-year plus span of life. So, if you're someone who is a Steam diehard and refuses to purchase games on Epic, because, and I completely understand the mindset, most people who are diehards within the PC gaming landscape and bought into the PC ecosystem is because they don't want any walls. They want to be able to they don't have to worry about, specific store exclusivity up until now, or, they can just go on and buy something and not have to worry about paying a subscription fee outside of, certain games, but to play online, all these things, it's less boundaries to play. But if you're somebody who is a Steam diehard, do you point to this and say, see, I told you this wasn't going to work. Look at these idiots, type of thing. Or is this just really, I guess, the price of building up to try to buy into the poker game, to get in and sit at that table when we're talking metaphorically about the games industry, considering, just Epic already knew they didn't plan to make be financially profitable until 2023. So they kind of knew this ahead of time. I'm sure they planned for it. They knew they were going to be in the red for a few years because they're trying to build up, and that's where I say you got to spend money to make money type of thing. Where do you see this coming down at, Mike? A little bit of both in both of those stances? Like, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I think that if Epic thought that it wasn't going to be a battle, they were sorely mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's the case here. I'm sure they knew that this was going to be a challenge, but I am curious as to, what the next phase of this all looks like, because when you hear that a company is hemorrhaging that type of money, it is alarming. But at the same time, like you said, there's a lot that goes into it. If you want to have a seat at the table, you have to be willing to spend money, and they obviously are certainly willing to spend money, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just there's a lot of red flags and concerns that pop up for me, because you see something and you kind of have to wonder, how is this ever going to be sustainable? Like, how is this going to be possible that survival can even happen at this point? And I don't necessarily know, that they were expecting it to cost that amount of money. It's hard to say without actually being in the room, kind of, having everything kind of planned out, or being in the board of directors, if you will, all that kind of stuff. You don't really know until you're there, obviously. But for me, I think if you were seriously trying to, build up, this is what you should have expected it to cost, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that, I don't think they're just going to pull the plug on this and say, well, didn't work, let's try something else, or let's just give up on it. Like, I don't think that that's where this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that they, likely as a team are a little shocked or even surprised that this is kind of what they're, what it's going to cost, or, what it's costing to make this thing happen for them. And it is something that, you just kind of, you kind of shake or scratch your head at, because it's just like, I can't believe that. I mean, I can believe that Steam is still holding on that strong, because Steam is a trusted commodity. Not that Epic Store isn't, but it was the first, and people, basically all the time have a really difficult time with change. They don't really like change. Nobody really likes change, for that matter. But this is something that I don't necessarily think that you can really point at as a Steam fanboy and be like, look, I told you this was never going to work. I mean, yeah, if you were expecting results that fast, absolutely it wasn't going to work. But at the end of the day, this is what it's costing for them to try to get their seat at the table. This is like the buy-in amount. And from here on out, we'll see what happens. I also, would like to point out, or would like to say and state that it's no coincidence that with the somewhat, huge fall, if you will, from grace that, Fortnite has had, because I know, people are still saying, well, Fortnite's still very popular. What are you talking about, fall from grace? Fortnite is still really popular. Yes, that's true. But it's also true that Fortnite is struggling right now with the amount of players, or lack thereof, that, exists right now. They're seeing not necessarily a massive exodus, if you will, but they are seeing a lot of players kind of leave their platform because they're unhappy with this, that, or the other thing. And that's not really, something that Epic can really hang their head on, because it is what it is. It's been a great run, and we've been kind of wondering when is that coming? Like, when is the end of this all coming, right?
Right.
But it appears that, we could be seeing the end, if you will, of what life after Fortnite is going to look like, basically, because you see something, that has been a monstrosity of it's just been an absolute beast, and it's starting to fall off a little bit. And they, started this new gaming endeavor, and, they're starting to run into a little bit of a bumpy road, and no one was ever going to say it was going to be no one ever said it was going to be sunshine and rainbows, but I am saying that they need to begin to figure out what they're going to do. Because at the end of the day, this, more or less looks like it's there's just a lot of red flags going on. I'm not willing to say it's going to be the death of Epic, but it is, there's a lot going on there. And to be, unbothered by it would be pretty crazy in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I keep thinking of, I wrote an article for a site a few years ago whenever Epic Game Store was first kind of announced and being brought up and being introduced. And I kind of think back to that in my, hypothesis around it, or the basis of my, opinion on it, was saying that this is what they're doing and how they're uniquely positioned with the popularity of Fortnite and everything right now. It hints so much, it reminds me so much of, if you look back at it, the similarities between Valve with Half-Life 2 and Steam, and saying, we're pretty much, Half-Life 2 was used as a Trojan horse for Steam and really being there. And granted, who knows, Valve may not have ever thought that Steam was going to get to the position it ever was going to, or it's gone to now, or anything like that. I'm sure they may not have envisioned that, but being this thing that, hey, if you want to play this game, just install this, you need to make a Steam account, but you'll be able to buy some games on there, but you need it to play this game. Same in the manner of, Half-Life 2, at that point, easily the most popular PC game to ever come out. So the user base instantly was boom. And you got to think of the amount of people who are playing Fortnite, especially at that time frame, whenever Epic Games Store was first announced, that, hey, what's the one thing you need to have whenever you want to play Fortnite? Especially on PC, if we're talking with the Epic Games Store, you need to have an Epic account and you need to have the Epic launcher. So, and that's what is built into that. So they already have that install base, like, Half-Life 2 was. So it was very similar to that, in that if anybody could pull it off, it was them. Now, has that paid off? It's hard to say so far. We look at it now, obviously numbers don't lie, potentially with what we're looking at, it may not pay off. And, we may see it be a little bit of a slower climb than maybe what they even thought it would be. But they're also in such a ridiculously good position, like an EA, where they can do games like Unraveled or Unravel 2 or whatever, and they could put that out, and they could have that not make any money, because it's all right. The FIFAs and Maddens of the world and microtransactions alone, and the amount of platforms those go on, that makes up enough money for it. We can put that out at something that isn't going to make us a ton of money, because we have other areas that make up that money. And even so, in, like they're saying, their revenue sharing is so much higher than that of a Steam. So, obviously, the more people they bring into there and whatnot, that they can give out more money because of the amount of money that Fortnite makes alone that can justify that. So I don't think it's as doom and gloom as, Apple's wanting to make it out to be. Obviously, Apple is going against them in a legal manner right now, so they're wanting to put them in the worst light as possible. But to me, that, I look at this as more as still in such an early phase right now, that it's just the cost of, you got to spend money to make money. This is the cost to play the game, and it's not going to pay off for a couple years. It's going to be a little bit. I don't think Epic has necessarily still had that first real big exclusive game to come out, where, they've had they've had the Division 2, they had Control, they had, some of these games, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, like, they've had a lot of these cool, experiences come out, but nothing that has so much hype built around it, so much pomp and circumstance around it, that has really truly driven them, people to get onto the Epic Game Store. Borderlands 3, I mean, that's, but now available on Steam, obviously, but like, stuff like that, big, but not in the way that they need that one big whale. And I think that's what's missing, is they don't have that big whale to kind of push people and force them in a little bit, where, now it's just more or less, yeah, it's tantalizing and more and I think we're seeing more, more ecstatic feelings about the Epic Game Store around the development end, where they're seeing, more indie developers and people going in, where they're getting guaranteed money, and that is what is nice about saying, hey, we're giving out exclusivity deals and you're going to get paid no matter what for coming and just being on our platform. And you're going to get a lot of that money, like look at 505 Games with Control, $10.45 million alone, just for, hey, we just want this game to be on here. And that's it. It doesn't matter how much it sells. Obviously, we want to sell as much as possible, but you're going to get this no matter what. So, it's stuff like that, not to mention the revenue sharing alone, that developers are getting 12% of their cut back. That's big to a lot of these indie developers. I mean, that is huge. That, whatever it is, 4 to 5% or whatever it was between, I think it's right around there between Steam and them, that it's like, that's huge to a lot of developers. Like, at the end of the day, that money that they make on that is going to be 10 times more impactful than it would for a large scale publisher and large scale developer too, I should say. But yeah, it's, I don't see this as, hey, we're not at the highest DEFCON right now, that it's getting bad, but I'm sure they want to be a little more profitable, but I think this is still, I think all of them want to be more profitable, but
right.
I just think this is still like, we're still in such an infancy stage of the Epic Game Store. Like, they haven't had that one big whale to come through and just blow everything out and say, no, this is the reason why you want to get on. It's almost like Steam with Half-Life Alyx and VR in general. Like, VR has been waiting for that one big thing to push it over. Half-Life Alyx has been really that first one to tell people to be like, no, this is the killer app to go out and buy a headset. This is the killer app to invest in this platform. So they just haven't had that exclusive that says, yo, this is the reason why. Because you have that one game that can make up a fuck ton of that money. Like, it really could. Especially too, yeah, the short term you'll get a lot of buzz and whatnot, but you look at some of these games that have been on, the on like Steam store and stuff like that. Like, some of these games that have been on for years, they've just been making money hand over fist still for years. I mean, you got to get one of those. Like, if they would secure, I wish they would have somehow managed to secure like Grand Theft Auto 5 to be an exclusive. Like, hey, we're removing it from, like, we worked out a deal, Rockstar's pulling it from Steam and we're putting it on Epic Game Store. Like, that's obviously a lot harder to do than an exclusive launch, but it's still really interesting to think about. Plus, too, all the free games, like, trust me, I'm thankful of that. Looking at my Epic Games like library, I can't tell you how many of these I've actually booted up just because I don't play a lot on the Epic Game Store. Nothing wrong with it. I just don't. Like, I think outside of like Fortnite or something like that, World War Z was probably the one I played the most on, I would want to say. But like, I think I have like well over 100 games, something like that. Like, it's crazy just because there's free games every week coming out that like you pick up, and it's big ones. Like, I have Grand Theft Auto 5 on there. I didn't buy it on Steam. Like, I just picked it up on there. Why would I? If they're giving it to me for free, I'm not going to pay for it somewhere else, type of thing. So it's crazy. I love to see this like come back to this, be like the time capsule, and see what things look like in 5 years, and see what this looks like, see how it's going to last that long, and what Steam looks like at. So, Mike, send the party chat before we wrap up the episode this week. If you're new to the show, party chat's where we propose one question at the end of each week of the show that we want to discuss with you. Could be as simple as, what's your favorite story beat in a game, or what have you been playing during quarantine, or it could be a little more in-depth as to why the negative stigma around gaming exists and such things like that. And after answering it ourselves, we'll kick it over to you to tweet your responses to us over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast, or email us at bonusaccessory@gmail.com, and we'll read some of those responses the following week. Last week's question: what is one feature you expected to see at the launch of the Xbox Series X/X or S that we didn't see, and in turn hope to see in the future? And Condor Clad over on Twitter said Discord for sure, the most commonly used communication app within gaming. No argument there, because mine was very similar. Mike, this week's question: what do you think is more important to the long-term sustainability of Game Pass? amount of content, we're talking games on there, and I'm sure quality games if you want to even spend on that, or affordability. Which is more do you think is going to help Game Pass in the long run? The amount of content and games that are on there, or rotating amount of content, or whatever you want to say, just content in general, or the low cost of being able to get into Game Pass and access all of that?
I would say the amount of content. I think that $15, a month is a reasonable amount for people to pay for what you're giving them currently. If you continue to provide, very, very good content at a reasonable price, people are still going to be willing to pay that. And that's the biggest thing is like people think that Game Pass is a little like I talked to my brother and he's like, well, I don't really use any of those services. So like, what's the point of Game Pass? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's not, I felt kind of like a dick, but it's like, it's not necessarily their fault that you don't use it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it benefits so many other people that just because you don't use it doesn't mean it's not a great product. So I think that keeping the amount of content up that, you see with that is the biggest and best thing for them to do going forward.
I'll be honest, like to my, if my own personal stance, like there's time that goes by that like I don't use Game Pass the month I pay for it, like to the degree that justifies me paying for it. But like, I still am like, no, it's a great deal. Like I still am going to pay for it for the next month because I probably will use it at some point. Like and I'm not one of those people. I'm much more am quick to cut the cord when it comes to like other like streaming services and stuff like that, just because I like playing video games more than binging shows or whatever like that. Like, granted, I love movies, so it's I guess pick your day of the week type of thing. But point being, like, I'll stay with Game Pass just for the sole fact of one, my live is tied to it and everything like that, or Xbox Network. Now we don't know live. Live's buried out back with Barry Huttle. I mean, it's gone. We don't talk about it anymore. But Xbox Network, like everything's built into that, and I want to keep that. And there are games that I like I have MCC on Steam just because like I have it on obviously on my original disc on Xbox One, but I have it on Steam just because I wanted to buy that and physically own it on PC. But I still need my live to play online and stuff like that. Like I'm still going to pay for it. But to me, I'm in the same thing that it's like $15 to me, it could go up to $20 and I would probably still pay for it. Especially like as we see more and more content come up, I wouldn't be shocked if we see it go to that. For the ultimate subscription at least, because you're not just getting the games in general, but like if you look at content overall, like I kind of throw in, granted it's more, probably services or even like hardware if you want to quote unquote hardware if you want to talk about it that way, but like xCloud. That's a service that's included with Game Pass Ultimate. So, for $15 a month, that's included with that. So I'm getting a lot of things for $15 a month that it went up to 20 as more of these, Xbox Game Pass and, or I should say Xbox Game Studios exclusives and things come out. These first party titles start to roll out and get on there. And, some of them are hitting big and things like that. Like if it went up to $20, I wouldn't be shocked, and I'd probably still pay for it because I'd still get my time out of it. Because realistically, at the end of the day, even if I didn't own an Xbox, like I could just buy that service and it's still worth it. I'd still get the games on PC. I'd still get the games on my phone. Like, all that stuff. That's a great deal in gaming that I think I don't ever see it going any higher than that personally. Now, who the fuck knows? They may change it all around in a couple years and maybe completely different, and the whole like Xbox All Access is truly the way to go, where you're now paying for your system and everything in a monthly thing. Who the hell knows? Like phones, pretty much. It's hard to say, but I'm more on, I want the content. I want to make sure there's content in there. That's what's going to keep me. If there isn't content there and I'm paying that money year after or month after month, yeah, then maybe I'll back out of it. But right now it's keeping me there. That like there may just be one night that like Molly half the time will be like, oh, okay, let's play something. And I'll be like, oh, what do you want to play? I don't know. Why don't you pull up your on Xbox and just see what's on there on Game Pass or whatever? Okay, yeah, and we'll skim through. And we'll usually find something, whether it's an indie game or a bigger game or whatever. Like, Cool. Yeah, I'll install it. It'll be done in a couple minutes. Boom, we'll play it. Like, I'd rather have that in that rotating amount of content and that fresh amount of content coming in there. That's going to keep me there more than, oh, there was a $5 price increase. Okay, $50 extra or $60 extra at the end of the year, like, to, keep this service or whatever. That's another game. That's three. Well, I paid for 3 games throughout the year and I ended up getting hundreds of them. Damn, tough scene. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's just my opinion with it, but I digress. Mike, I think that's going to do it for episode this week. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on the interwebs to talk about all the nerdy shit we talked about today? Kojima potentially partnering up with Xbox, Epic Games, and Steam, and the battle of PC exclusivity and all that bullshit. Where can people find you on the interwebs to talk about all of this?
You can find me on Twitter at TOYSXLDIER. That's Toy Soldier, and the second O is an X. You can find me on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier.
Nice. And as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travis on most internet platforms, including Twitter at Travels_. That's TRAVLESS_. You can also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Travis_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some video games with me over on Xbox Live, you can do so at just regular old Traveless. That's TRAVLESS, no underscore. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz I tell you every week. And then also follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like and our dope giveaways. Mike, thank you so much for being here and going through the show with me. And thank you all for listening, sharing, and being part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors. Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.